Hi everyone, welcome to our video of how to lay a patio. We are working in the Blackdown Hills in Somerset and we're lucky enough to be working at this really stunning barn conversion. Unfortunately, when this was completed by the developer, they didn't finish off all the landscaping. So we're here just to get everything tidied up and finished off for the client. So we're going to break down over the coming week each individual step to give you a step-by-step guide, and you can see how it's done and be able to do it for yourself. As with anything in life, a prior preparation and planning prevents doing a rubbish job. For this reason, when we're doing patios, we always work out the type of slabs we're using so we know the finished thickness, then we can get all the levels right from the very start. These particular ones are calibrated, meaning they're all the same thickness. These are market stone, and this colour is Sahara Multi. Got these from Bradford's, really great slabs, use loads and loads of these. A very useful tool is line marker. This means you can draw out areas. If you've got certain patterns, you can mark them out and you can get a feel of how things fit together and check that everything lines up with itself. A really good visual aid that we use a lot in building work, especially when customers are struggling to visualize things, is we will lay out battens. It could be any type of wood or tapes or anything just to give that perspective. And with this, you can even mark out, draw things like patio furniture, benches, tables and chairs, and get a good feel for how much room you've got around it. Really useful little tip. So when laying a patio, the key before you do anything is to ensure that you get a decent hard standing base for a foundation. Here we're quite fortunate because we've got hard standing anyway, so it's just a case of getting it all nice and smooth and flat. If you're in a setting, say with a garden with grass, you dig out to a solid layer and then you'd fill up with 100mm of crushed stone. So you can use something like MOT type 1 stone as a base layer. What we like to do is on the top we like to use a 20mm dust just to get that fine tuning. What we'll do here, we will grade all that along and we'll use a grading bar before we whack it down and get it all solid. This means that it's nice and smooth, there's no lumps and bumps in it, and it just makes the slab laying much easier. We always ensure that we have a 1 in 80 gradient. Some people use a 1 in 60 gradient. This means for every 1 metre we come along, we drop 12.5mm. So we'll have the high side at the back here, running down to the front here, and this just allows any water to run off, stops any pooling on the patio. Okay, so once you've got your scalpings down nice and compacted and level, there's a few different systems you can use to ensure that your slabs keep a continuous gradient all the way through and keep your correct degree for runoff. What we've done here, we've run a timber batten along each side of our patio. Then got a string line here running underneath it, going side to side, so we can see quite clearly that we've got, my foot will go under nice and easily. My foot is 60mm, which just happens to be the perfect depth to get our slabs and our cement in. The other option, if you haven't got the facility to do this, is you can have a spirit level, and if you make sure, preferably a long one, if you make sure the bubble's just to one side of the line, then that'll be the correct gradient to give you the right runoff. So back on the subject of prior preparation and planning, before you start laying slabs, it's always worth laying a few out and working out exactly where you want to start and the format of how they're going. These ones that we've got here are really simple because they're different shapes, different sizes, and you build a pattern with them. So in some ways, they can be a bit more forgiving. If they were, for example, square slabs where they're all exactly the same size, you might want to think about getting a full slab in your entrance where you walk in, because otherwise if you just start at the back and move forward, you can end up with a tiny little slip as you walk in, and it's going to look a bit nasty to say the least. So just having a bit of thought and starting with a whole one, laying them all out on the ground, marking them out and working out your first cut can give you a much neater and tidier finish. Okay, so a couple little tricks we've learned the hard way over the years is with our mix, we always use a sharp sand because it's much stronger when it sets. We always make sure we have a nice wet mix. It helps with adherence to the slabs. Again, this ties in with what we were saying about getting your bed nice and smooth. This only works if you've got a reasonably tight bed. If you've got a really thick bed like that, because it's wet, it will just slop away and fall away and it'll turn into a bit of a nightmare. So you can see there, really nice wet mix, 5 parts sharp sand, 1 part cement. On the backs of the slabs, this is essential with natural stone. We just do it on everything now, just to make life easier, and it's kind of a belt and braces job, I suppose. So we mix up solution, 1 part SBR, 1 part water, 5 parts cement. Then we just make sure we cover the whole back of each slab, like so. Get the whole lot completely covered, and then when it goes down, it's not going anywhere. It sticks nice and tight. Okay, so the beauty of having the string line is you've got the line there all for you. So you simply get your slab underneath. Obviously you've got a really wet mix here. If you use too dry a mix, you may well come back the following day and find out that it hasn't stuck. I've experienced this many years ago, and it's not a very fun day when you come in to discover that. So a good little trick we use is we line it up nice and tight with each side, then just tap it down to either side height, and you can follow the lines that are already there. So you can see very easily that you're right for height. Good on the string line as well. Ribbon slabs, you do have some slight up and downs, but you kind of take the average and simply slide it out to your desired location. And if you do get a bit of cement on the slabs, don't leave this to dry. If this dries by the following day, it will cause you an absolute nightmare. Instead, have a wet sponge near you, much like tiling when you're doing it in a house. Just go over all your joints, and if you keep things nice and clean now, it makes it much easier going forward. Okay, so the final part of patio laying is doing the pointing. There's a few options when you come to do this. You can just use sand and cement. This is something we did for many years. However, we came unstuck one day when it started raining halfway through, and it just made a real mess with all the pointing, just sent it all over slabs, had to clean it all up, caused a lot of work and effort. So instead, we started using Stone Market Fast Point, really good product. It's resin based, so it can be laid in all weathers, doesn't matter if it's raining or anything like that. In fact, when you go to lay it, you need to wet all the slabs up first, because this stops a lot of the staining from going into the slabs. One good little tip here is, with your preparation earlier on, when you're laying the slabs, is making sure you've got a decent bit of depth in there. It's getting the balance between, you don't want it too shallow so you haven't got enough pointing, and you don't want it too deep so you need loads and loads of pointing. So it's worth having a bit of thought when you're laying it. You can scrape them out as you're going, clean them off with the sponge that we said about. That keeping it all nice and clean pays dividends now. So the official guidance on this is just to pour it all out in a pile and sweep it over with a brush, and then strike it in with a pointing iron. We've tried this, but we found that on some smaller joints, it can sometimes not go in as deep. So what we prefer to do, it does take fractionally longer, but it does a much better job. So we just pick it out as we're going and just pull it along. Then you can ensure you've got a nice full depth, even finish all the way. Then as you're going, you can just sweep it along with a brush, let it go off, and you've got a really nice pointed patio. So our last top tip is a bit of attention to detail that gives a difference between your patio looking okay and it looking really, really good. Now, not everyone does this. It does make it slightly harder, but it's well worthwhile, we feel. So when you're laying your slabs, if you've got a pattern mix like this with different sizes, always make sure any joint line where the slabs intersect only have a T in it. Don't ever have crosses. Tiny little detail, but it makes a massive difference. Also, with the lines, you look at any of our patios that we do, you'll notice that there's never any one line longer than 1.8 meters. Now, when you're laying the slabs out, it makes it a lot more complicated, and you have to kind of keep eyes everywhere to make sure you can follow this formula. But this really does make the difference, and it gives you a really good, exceptional finish. This job was a little bit challenging to start off with, as the developers had abandoned it and left all the landscaping not finished. This meant that we didn't know what was supposed to be going on, what the original plan was. We just had different drainage at all different heights, so we had to kind of work it out as we were going. The client's original specification to us was they wanted something that was low maintenance. They wanted some hard standing areas for patio furniture and for entertaining guests, and most importantly of all, the whole garden had to be completely secure, so it was roofless proof. He's a little bit of a Houdini if you don't keep an eye on him. We're really happy with how all the patios turned out, and it's really added a lot of value to the property.